We often think about our intelligence as this amazing thing, right? This big brain, this ability to figure stuff out. We build cities, write books, send rockets to space, but where did it come from? Did we just get lucky, or was there something pushing us, forcing us to get smarter just to survive? A lot of smart people, scientists who study how we evolved, they think climate change played a huge role. Not the climate change we talk about today, with cars and factories. This was way back. This was the climate change that happened naturally, over millions of years, before there were even humans as we know them. It was a time of big shifts, big changes in how the world worked, and those changes, they made life hard. Really hard. Imagine being one of our very early ancestors, not quite human yet, more ape-like, living in Africa. The world was different then. Maybe more forests, more trees to climb, more fruit to eat. Life was tough, for sure, but predictable in some ways. Then things started to shift. The climate got drier. Forests began to shrink. Grasslands, savannas started to spread out. This was a massive change. It wasn't just a hotter summer or a colder winter. It was a fundamental change to the landscape, to the whole ecosystem, and this change meant that the old ways of living, they didn't work as well anymore. If you lived in a forest and ate fruit and suddenly the forest was gone, what do? Well, you either die or you find a new way to live. This is where the pressure started. This is where the forcing began. One of the first big things that changed was how we moved around. Think about it. If you're in a forest swinging from branches, you're pretty good. But on an open grassland, walking on two legs, bipedalism suddenly makes a lot more sense. You can see over the tall grass to spot predators, you can carry food or your babies more easily, and maybe, just maybe, standing up straight meant less of your body was exposed to the hot African sun at midday. These little advantages, they added up. But switching from four legs to two, that's not a small thing. It takes time, it takes a reason. And the changing climate, the shrinking forests, the growing savannas, they gave our ancestors a very good reason. They forced the issue. But just walking on two legs isn't smart in itself, it's a physical adaptation. The real test came with food. In the forest, maybe there was fruit. In the savanna, fruit was scarcer. You had to find other things to eat. Maybe tough roots, maybe seeds, and critically, maybe meat. But early hominins, they weren't big fast predators like lions, so how do you get meat? This is where intelligence starts to really kick in. You don't hunt a wildebeest with your bare hands. You need a plan. You need tools. So our ancestors started picking up rocks. And then maybe they figured out how to hit one rock with another to make a sharp edge. This was a game changer. Now you could cut meat off a carcass, you could dig for roots, you could process tougher foods that other animals couldn't eat. Making a tool, even a simple one, takes thought. It's not just instinct. You have to see a rock, see its potential, understand how to strike it, and imagine what it could be used for. That's a spark of something new. That's problem solving. And the climate, by making food harder to get in the old ways, pushed them to solve this problem. It forced them to innovate. And it wasn't just about making tools, it was about finding food when it was scattered across a huge changing landscape. You needed to remember where the water holes were. You needed to remember where certain plants grew at certain times of the year. You needed to know the patterns of the animals. That takes memory. That takes mapping skills in your head. That takes a brain that can store and retrieve a lot of information. And if you didn't have that, if you couldn't find food in the dry season, you didn't make it. The climate weeded out the less resourceful. Living on the savanna also meant facing bigger, scarier predators. You couldn't just climb a tree anymore if there weren't any trees around, so what do? You work together, you stand your ground as a group, you use those tools maybe to scare off a hyena or at least protect each other. This teamwork, this cooperation, also needs a level of intelligence. You need to understand what others are thinking. You need to communicate, even if it's just through gestures or simple sounds. You need to build trust. And big brains, they're not just for solving puzzles about tools. They're also really good for social puzzles. Who can you trust? Who's trying to cheat you? Who's a good leader? These social smarts, they're incredibly important for survival in a group. And living in a group became more and more important as the environment got tougher and less predictable. The climate was, in a way, pushing us to be more social, which in turn pushed us to be smarter about our social interactions. Think about the energy cost of a big brain. Your brain uses a ton of energy, even when you're just sitting there thinking. It's like a super hungry organ. How could our ancestors afford to grow these big energy demanding brains? It had to come from somewhere, and that somewhere was a better diet. Getting meat, even from scavenging, provided a much richer source of calories and nutrients than just plants. And those tools we just talked about, they made getting and processing meat much more efficient. So, the climate pressures that push for tool use and meat eating also created the fuel needed for bigger brains. It was a powerful feedback loop. Tougher climate leads to new food strategies, which leads to better nutrition, which allows for bigger brains, which in turn allows for even better food strategies and problem solving. It's like a positive spiral, driven by negative pressure. Scientists talk about something called the variability selection hypothesis. It's a fancy way of saying that environments that are always changing, always unpredictable, they select for species that are really good at adapting. Not just adapting to one specific thing, but adapting to change itself. If the climate is always going from wet to dry, from forest to savanna, from hot to cold, then the individuals who can figure out new solutions, who are flexible, who can learn, those are the ones who survive and pass on their genes. And what is that ability to figure out new solutions and be flexible? That's intelligence. So, a constantly shifting climate was like a gym for our brains, always making them work harder, always pushing them to be more agile. The East African Rift Valley, where a lot of our earliest fossils are found, is a perfect example of this. It's a geologically active area with volcanoes and earthquakes. And because of these geological forces and its location, the climate there was incredibly unstable over millions of years. Lakes would appear and disappear. Forests would grow and then die back. It was a roller coaster. And right there, in that turbulent environment, is where we see the most significant leaps in hominin evolution, including brain size. Coincidence? Probably not. It's a strong argument that the chaos of the climate was a major driver. We also started to control fire. This was another massive leap. Fire gave us warmth, protection from predators at night, and light. But perhaps most importantly, fire let us cook food. Cooking made food easier to digest. It broke down tough fibers in plants and made meat safer and more nutritious. This meant even more calories for our hungry brains, and think about the intelligence needed to control fire. You can't just stumble upon it and keep it going. You need to understand how to gather fuel, how to keep it from going out, how to start it again. That's foresight. That's planning. That's a high level of cognitive ability. And why did we need fire? In part to cope with colder periods, or to make the tough new foods of the savanna edible. Again, climate played a role. The story doesn't end in Africa. Eventually, our ancestors started to move out. The out-of-Africa migrations, as they're called. These were also often driven by climate shifts. When resources dried up in one area, populations would spread out, looking for new places to live, new food sources. And when they moved into new parts of the world, they faced completely new challenges. Different plants, different animals, different climates, cold weather in Europe, for example. Adapting to these new environments demanded even more intelligence. You couldn't just use the old tricks. You needed new tools for hunting different animals, you needed new ways to build shelter from the snow and cold. You needed to learn about completely new ecosystems. This constant need to adapt to novel situations, driven by moving into new climate zones, kept the evolutionary pressure on our brains. It was a continuous test. Imagine a group of early humans facing a harsh winter for the first time. They needed to invent warm clothing. They needed to figure out how to store food. They needed to cooperate on a level perhaps never seen before, just to survive. These weren't things they could just instinctively know. They had to figure it out. They had to be smart. And the ones who figured it out, they were the ones who lived to pass on those problem-solving genes. So when we look back at our evolutionary journey, it seems clear that climate change wasn't just a backdrop. It was an active force. It wasn't a gentle suggestion. It was a relentless pressure cooker, pushing our ancestors to innovate, to cooperate, to think, to plan, to remember, to adapt. It weeded out those who couldn't keep up, and it favored those with bigger, more capable brains. It's not that climate change alone made us smart. Evolution is always complex. Many factors play a role. But climate change, with its constant, unpredictable shifts, created a unique set of circumstances that seems to have put a premium on intelligence. It made being smart a survival advantage, not just a nice to have, it made it essential. Our ancestors who could best understand their changing world, who could anticipate what might happen next, who could invent new ways to get food or stay safe, they were the ones who thrived. And they passed on those smart genes. Over millions of years, this process refined our brains, making them bigger, more complex, and more capable of abstract thought. Think about the very basic elements of intelligence: problem solving, planning, memory, learning. All of these would have been critical for navigating a world undergoing constant climate shifts. Problem solving. Where do we find water during a drought? How do we hunt this new animal species that just migrated into our territory? What do we do when the plants we usually eat don't grow this year? Each of these is a problem that needs a solution, and the climate kept serving up new ones. Planning. We need to move the group to the river before it dries up completely. We need to hunt enough food to last through the lean season. We need to gather these specific plants before they wither. Planning requires thinking about the future, predicting outcomes, and coordinating actions. A dynamic climate makes foresight even more valuable. Memory. Remember where the big game animals migrate. Remember which plants are poisonous and which are edible. Remember what worked last time the long rains failed. A good memory for environmental details was a massive asset in a changing world. In learning, we tried this approach and it failed. Let's try something new. The ability to learn from experience and to teach those lessons to others would have been invaluable. When old ways of doing things stopped working because the environment changed, learning new ways became a matter of life or death. And then there's language. The more complex our social structures became, the more elaborate our hunting strategies, the more varied our diet, the more we needed to communicate. Sharing information about distant water sources, coordinating a complex group hunt, teaching children how to make a new tool, these all require sophisticated communication. Language allows us to share knowledge, to build on the experiences of others, and to transmit culture across generations. This is a massive leap in intelligence, and it makes sense that it would evolve in a world where adapting quickly was key. If the climate kept changing, you couldn't afford for each generation to start from scratch. You needed to pass on accumulated wisdom. The ability to create culture itself, the shared beliefs and practices and knowledge of a group, is a sign of our high intelligence. And culture, in many ways, is an adaptive strategy. It allows groups of people to adapt to their environment much faster than biological evolution alone can. If the climate shifts, a group can invent new cultural practices, new ways of hunting, new clothing, new shelters, and pass them on quickly, without waiting for genetic changes. This cultural flexibility, born from our intelligence, was a powerful tool against environmental unpredictability. We consider also the idea of niche construction. This is where an organism changes its environment to suit itself. Beavers build dams. Humans, with our intelligence, started to do this on a much grander scale. We started to build shelters, to use fire to clear land, to eventually cultivate plants. These are all ways we used our brains to alter our surroundings, to make them more hospitable, to buffer ourselves against the harshness of a changing climate. It's a testament to how our intelligence allowed us to push back against the forces that shaped us. So yes, it seems very likely that climate change in its broad ancient sense was a powerful, persistent force that shaped our intelligence. It set up the challenges, it created the problems, it presented the life or death situations that only a smarter, more adaptable creature could overcome. It wasn't a gentle nudge, it was a constant, demanding pressure. Our big, complex brains are not just some random evolutionary quirk. They are, in a very real sense, a product of millions of years of our ancestors having to outsmart a constantly changing world. They are survival machines honed by environmental stress, the ability to innovate, to cooperate, to learn, to plan, to remember. These are the hallmarks of our intelligence, and they were all critical for navigating a world where the only constant was change. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That the very thing we sometimes struggle with today, a rapidly changing climate, is also a major reason why we develop the capacity to understand and perhaps even manage it. Our intelligence was forged in the fire of environmental instability. It's our legacy from a long line of ancestors who were smart enough to survive a planet that never stopped throwing new challenges at them. And they became smart because they had no other choice. It was forced upon them and upon us by a world in flux. We are, in a very deep way, the children of climate change, and our smarts are the ultimate survival tool it gave us.